The losers in this were the American people, whatever your political views, because we all have a right to have the person who actually won the election take power. We all have the right to there be a fair count.
Helen Thomas, Dean of the White House Reporters, was quoted as saying that Bush is the worst president she has covered, the worst president ever. At President Bush's pre-war news conference, for the first time in 40 years, Helen Thomas was not allowed to ask a question. She had disappeared.
A chill wind is blowing in this nation. A message is being sent through the White House and its allies in talk radio and Clear Channel and Cooperstown. If you oppose this administration, there can and will be ramifications.
In the last several years, media corporations and politics have merged in a new way.
Murdoch is a brilliant man who, what he has done and has had a tremendous influence in the worst possible way on culture and on media in the United States and throughout the world. And what he does it in England and he does it in the United States. His shtick is appealing to working class people and taking them to the right. And he does this through violence. He does this through super patriotism. He does this through sensationalism. So what you have now, and I'll give him credit for this, Fox Television is the first major network that has no pretense. I mean, CBS and NBC, they have a pretense to objectivity.
Rupert Murdoch's Fox News Network is run by Roger Ailes. Ailes was the executive producer of TV for Richard Nixon. He was a consultant to Ronald Reagan and George Bush I. Tony Snow, a host, was a Bush speechwriter. The anchor, Britt Yoon, contributed articles to the ultra-conservative American Spectator. The phrase fair and balanced is repeated incessantly, like a mantra.
Fair, balanced.
Goebbels said, if you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it.
All of their talk shows are controlled by extreme right-wing Republicans. And it is a front for the right wing of the Republican Party.
John Ellis, the head of Fox's election desk, Jeb and George W. Bush's first cousin. And it's notable that on election night, the first network to declare that George W. Bush had won the presidency of the United States was Fox. And it was John Ellis who made the calculation and the determination that they should make that call.
But it's not only Fox. At GE, the wall between journalism and politics was also broken. According to the Reuters news service, former General Electric chairman Jack Welch came into the NBC studio and insisted that the race be called for fellow Republican George Bush. All the while, an NBC in-house taping system was recording Welch in the studio that night. NBC refused to turn over the tape despite repeated requests from Congressman Henry Waxman. NBC President Andrew Lack claimed turning over the tape would infringe on the editorial process. Waxman replied, "Mr. Welch is not a journalist."
And we now know the studies show pretty clearly, as they understood, they lost the vote. If there had been a fair vote, they would have been out of power.
Calling the election for George Bush that night set the tone for any recount scenarios.
And the whole tenor of the coverage followed that. If you watch Chris Matthews, O'Reilly, Brian Williams, when is Gore going to finally give up? Another desperation measure by Gore. The assumption being Bush had won. Gore is just scrambling, trying to sneak his way in through some loophole.
The irony is that as the corporate news media has moved to the right, charges of a liberal bias have become pervasive. This impression was created because the Republicans have an arsenal of on-air pundits, adept at polarizing opinion and ridiculing anyone who disagrees. And they can rely on Murdoch-owned media assets. Some stories disappear. Others are repeated endlessly. Murdoch, in turn, gets his deregulation. A conservative pundit, Bill Salmon, has written a book about Al Gore's attempt to steal the election. I find out that the party launching his book will be full of lobbyists and pundits, and decide to go videotape them. Funny thing is, these behind-the-scenes operators don't like to be taped.
You're not allowed to film the building without permission. As the right got more and more of a toehold in the media culture generally, through the efforts of Heritage and Hoover Foundation and others, that myth became increasingly serviceable, you see. You could cow moderates, much less liberals. You could cow anyone who wasn't a right-winger working in the media by constantly assailing them with accusations of liberal bias.
Or by assailing them about a lack of patriotism.
I'm Janine Jackson from FAIR, the Media Watch Group. I thought you might like to know that the Heritage Foundation has announced that Jesus would support a war on Iraq.
The argument is no longer made that news media are hard on Republicans and easy on Teddy Kennedy and Ralph Nader. That's not the argument. That argument is so ludicrous as it doesn't even pass the giggle test. The argument now simply redefines left-right entirely in ways that drop out core issues of class, core issues of corporate power.
The media does not discuss the growing, inequity between the rich and the poor and the disappearance of the middle class. I could go on and on and on. There is no evidence whatsoever for the claim that there's a liberal bias in the media. It's based entirely on a stereotypic view of the reporters themselves, many of whom may be liberals. Probably they're centrists by now. But the fact is that their own personal views have nothing to do with what gets on TV.
Winston Smith worked at the Ministry of Truth. His job was to alter past news stories so that the version of the truth given by the ruling elite was never contradicted. One of the most troubling things about the media's handling of the 2000 election came a year later. A consortium of major news organizations hired the respected National Opinion Research Council, called NORC, to inspect the 170,000 uncounted votes. NORC was not allowed to characterize its findings. The media companies did that. And the disturbing thing is that they hid the truth by distorting the Florida Supreme Court's actual ruling, which called for the counting of all votes where the intent of the voter was clear. According to the BBC's Greg Palast, who watched the NORC counting operation firsthand, one counter said, quote, "It screamed at you. If someone circled Gore, exactly who do you think they wanted as president?" The consortium did not comment on the exclusion of tens of thousands of clearly marked ballots, which the NORC data reveals. Instead, the consortium came up with a tortured analysis that showed Bush would have retained a lead under one method of counting, just the undervote. On December 24th, 2000, on NBC's Meet the Press, the moderator, Tim Russert, said the following: "Florida, Florida, Florida is over. The board is now retired." And that was pretty much the end of the mainstream news media's coverage of the Florida recount and the Supreme Court's decision to stop the counting of votes.
Had Nicaragua had an election like this and the Sandinistas won, the very people who had won the Republican election would have insisted that we not only invade Nicaragua, but that all the people who engineered the election be held for war crimes.
They know that they're not there serving at the will of the American people. They know that they stole this election and they created this fraud by keeping African Americans away from the polls. They know this. And they know they have very little time to enact their agenda because they know that they're going to get the crap beat out of them next time. Forget what the media is telling you, okay? This guy ain't going to last, all right? And he knows it. They all know it. But if they would do this, if they would stoop this low to steal our White House, what else would they do? What else are they capable of? What else are they capable of? I want to know.
So what we have here is not the sunlight of democracy, but the dark, ominous shadows of totalitarianism, despotism, fascism.